Hello, today we are going to be taking some notes for our interactive notebooks. They're going to go on page 82, and these notes are on terminology and the different terminology that we use in math to identify the parts of an expression. Please put the date, 1/23/18. Put your class period, whether you're 3, 4, or 5. Also, could you please put in the topic, terminology, as well as the essential question, can I identify parts of an expression mathematically? If you need to have more time to do this, please pause the video and you can fill in what you need and then begin again as soon as you've got it done. I'm going to write my notes, and then when I'm all done, I will put them into my interactive notebook. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to basically list just some terms that we need to know when we're talking about expressions. And of course, what a better place to start than actually talking about what is an expression. And the first thing we're going to look at is a numeric expression. Now, the biggest difference between an expression and an equation is whether there is an equal sign. If there's no equal sign, you're talking about an expression. If you're talking about something that has an equal sign, you're looking at an equation. So we're going to talk about parts of an equation, things that make up equations, and those are expressions, but they don't have equal signs. And so we're not solving an expression, we're evaluating an expression because, like I said, it doesn't have that equal sign. Now, numeric is a word that we use when we're talking about numbers. So a numeric expression would mean it contains numbers and an operation. And so an example for that, I'm going to write EX, an example would be like 2 divided by 1 or 12 times 3. Those would be 2 examples. And I'm going to actually make this a little bit bigger so that you, okay. So that's the first one. So if we have numeric expressions, the second type of expression that we have is an algebraic expression. Now, an algebraic expression is, once again, an expression, doesn't have an equal sign, but this time it's going to contain a variable and or numbers and operational symbols. So this time it contains a variable, and that variable could be any letter that we use to represent an unknown. So it contains a variable and or numbers and mathematical operational symbols. Okay, so for example, an example of this would be like 3 times n. Now, when we do, oftentimes when we do expressions in algebra, we stop writing our multiplication symbol like this, like an x, because it can be kind of confusing, because this looks like that could be a variable or it could be the multiplication symbol. So we have some other ways that we can write this same 3 times n. We can write it as 3 and use the dot multiplication symbol. That means the same thing. It's just another way of writing multiplication. Or we can actually do just 3n. Whenever you put a variable next to the number, that is signifying that you would be multiplying it. And all 3 of those are representing that you would be doing 3 times n. Or you could have 12 times p plus 6. So notice in this case that you've got a variable, you've got an operation, it's multiplying by this 12, but then you also are going to be adding the 6, so it has numbers and variables in it. Both of those are all okay. So now that we've talked about, we have algebraic expressions and numeric expressions. We have variables. Now, a variable just is a letter that represents a number. Now, sometimes that number is unknown. Sometimes it is known. It just depends, but it always represents a number. And some examples of that could be n, or sometimes we use x, or we can use p, or basically any letter that we like to use. But those are some really common ones. Now, we're going to keep moving on. We're going to look at a term. Now, a term is an individual element of a math expression. Okay, so that seems more confusing than really what it is. Basically, it's just one of the parts of a larger expression. So it could be a single number. Or it could be a variable. Or it could be a kind of a mixture of the two. It could also, meaning that it could also be the product of several numbers. And variables. And how do you know that they're terms? Well, you know because they are separated by or from each other term or from the other terms. And we know they're separated because they have by the addition sign or subtraction sign. Okay? Whoops, excuse me. There you go. Okay, so a term is an individual element of a math expression. It could be a single number or a variable. It could also be the product of several numbers and variables separated from the other terms by the plus or the minus sign, the addition or the minus sign. So, for example, because I think an example is going to make this much clearer. If you were to have 2x, so 2 times the variable x, okay, that is a term. Or you could have, here's a bigger one, 3 times n plus 6. Now notice here, this is a term, and this number would be a term because they're separated by that. And so that means that that expression would have 2 terms in it. Okay, now for the next part, I'm actually going to go to the back. And so the back of my page is blank, so that's okay. But I'm going to show you how we can add this in. And I'm going to put in number 5. Number 5 is the coefficient. Now, a coefficient is a number, or it's the number that is multiplied by the variable in an algebraic expression. So this would be, for example, if you had 3 times n or 3n, the coefficient would be the 3. See, because it's multiplied by the variable. So that's what makes it the coefficient. So these would be the coefficients. And then finally, the last term that we have is the constant. And the constant is going to be a number without a variable. And it's a value that doesn't change. A variable will change depending on what value we give it, but a constant doesn't change. So for example, if we had 3 times n plus 6, this would change because it has a variable. But this right here, this doesn't change. This is your constant. Notice it doesn't have a variable. It does not have a variable. That's your constant. Finally, let's do one final example of everything. Okay? And this example is 12n minus 3. And so let's start looking at this. First thing, it is a algebraic expression. How do I know that? I know it because there's no equal sign, first of all. Second of all, it's got a variable. That tells me it's algebraic. Okay, now, how many terms? Well, I've got this one, and I've got this one separated by that. So that tells me there are 2 terms. All right? Now let's look at let's look and see where our variable is, our coefficient, and our constant. First of all, this little n right here, that is your variable. Then, right here, what does that make that? Well, that is going to be your coefficient. I'm writing it kind of funny. Okay? So we've got our coefficient, our variable, and then what does that leave that? Well, that leaves that as your constant. And hopefully, now you know what an algebraic expression, a numeric expression is, how to determine the terms, how to find the coefficient, how to find the variable, and what is the constant. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or to talk to your teacher, or you can also review this video and go back and watch it again. Have a great day.